The night had the texture of glass, brittle, reflective, and cold enough to sting. The city's core was unusually quiet for a Thursday, its traffic filtered down to the occasional hum of tires across damp asphalt. City Hall stood ahead, flood-lit and expressionless, a marble body under white light. The black sedan rolled to a soft stop at the curb, engine purring like a restrained animal. Inside, the driver sat still for a moment before cutting the ignition. His hand lingered on the key, not out of hesitation, but ritual. Outside, air moved through the narrow streets in controlled drafts. Funneling between the towers that seemed always to be watching, then came the flash of blue. It began without drama. 2 officers, 1 cruiser, a practiced choreography. The younger of the 2 stepped out first, his breath misting in the air, his hand resting, not quite casually, on the holster. The older one followed with the slow composure of someone used to authority's weight. Their movements were procedural, rehearsed, neither hurried nor overtly aggressive. The scene was ordinary enough to be terrifying. The driver watched them approach through the side mirror. His reflection fractured in the glass, eyes steady, posture upright, no visible tremor. He knew the posture mattered. Every muscle carried a history of instruction, how not to move too fast, how to keep hands visible, how to survive misrecognition. The first officer tapped the window. "License and registration, sir." The voice was crisp, polite. But the word "sir" landed oddly, a formality with a tremor of disbelief. The man rolled down the window halfway. "Of course," he said. His tone was even, deliberate. He reached slowly into the glove compartment, pulled out the documents, and passed them through the narrow gap. The officer took them, glancing toward the car's interior as though searching for a reason. His flashlight beam swept across leather seats, a folded coat, the faint glint of a wedding ring. "What's the problem, officer?" "Routine stop," came the answer. Routine. The word was a shield, thin, institutional, non-committal. The other officer circled the rear of the vehicle, eyes tracing the plates, the tail lights, the faint dust on the bumper. Everything was in order, and yet the scene persisted, as though reality itself refused to move forward until the ritual was complete. The driver sat still, hands now folded on the steering wheel. The silence pressed down, expanding between the 3 men. Somewhere behind them, a security camera pivoted on its mount, its red light blinking like a pulse. The first officer returned from his brief inspection, papers in hand. "This is a government plate," he said, voice flattening. "It is," the driver replied. "What's your business here tonight?" "I work here." The officer hesitated. "At City Hall?" A nod. The older officer stepped closer now, studying the man's face with the slow, skeptical gaze of someone caught between doubt and recognition. "You work at City Hall?" he repeated. "I do." The pause that followed was too long for comfort. In the fluorescent wash of the cruiser's headlights, the scene took on a stage's stillness. 3 figures caught in a tableau of authority, suspicion, and endurance. "Step out of the vehicle." "Please." The man did not sigh. He did not roll his eyes or protest. He opened the door carefully as if handling something fragile. The streetlight above cast him in sharp relief. Tailored suit, dark skin reflecting the light's cold sheen, expression unreadable. He stood before them, taller than both officers. Not defiant, not submissive, simply present. The older one asked, "Can I see some identification, sir?" He reached into his breast pocket and withdrew a slim leather wallet. The gesture was slow, measured, an unspoken choreography rehearsed by generations. He flipped it open and held it out. The gold-embossed seal caught the light first. Office of the Mayor, City of Easton. Neither officer spoke. The younger one's throat tightened audibly. The older one blinked once, twice, as though his mind needed to catch up to what his eyes had already processed. The silence became a 4th presence, dense, deliberate, impossible to ignore. "I'm Mayor Christopher Lang," he said quietly, "and I'd like to know why I was stopped tonight." The street seemed to shrink around them. Traffic murmured distantly, indifferent. Somewhere in the upper floors of City Hall, motion sensors flicked lights on and off in empty corridors. The city watched, impassive. The older officer cleared his throat. "Mr. Mayor, we didn't realize—" "I'm sure you didn't." There was no anger in the words, only precision. They landed with the authority of a verdict. The younger officer tried to recover. "There's been a report of a vehicle matching this description." "Of course there has." His tone remained calm, even. A blade sheathed in civility. "There always is." He returned the ID to his pocket. For a moment, neither man moved. The lights of the cruiser continued to rotate, casting blue shadows across his face, across theirs, across the marble steps behind him. The world seemed to pulse with the rhythm of exposure. When he finally spoke again, it was almost a whisper. "Turn those lights off." The officer hesitated, then obeyed. The sudden absence of color made the street seem darker, emptier. "Am I free to go?" the mayor asked. "Yes, sir," the older one said quickly. "Of course." He nodded once, not in gratitude but acknowledgement. Then he stepped back into the car, closing the door with quiet finality. The engine started steady and low. As he pulled away, neither officer moved to stop him. They simply stood there, two silhouettes under a sterile lamp, stripped of authority by their own reflex. The sedan disappeared into the grid of downtown lights, leaving behind only the faint scent of exhaust and something heavier, the residue of shame. Perhaps, though neither man would name it. Above them, the streetlight hummed softly, its filament trembling in the wind. It had seen everything and would see it again tomorrow. From a distance, the view from a security camera mounted on the corner, the moment looked almost mundane. 3 men under a lamp, an exchange, a departure. No raised voices, no struggle, just another frame in the endless footage of the city's order maintaining itself. But the silence that followed would echo. Through corridors, through headlines, through the brittle surface of public decorum, the city, in its glass and marble perfection, had blinked and revealed what lived beneath. Morning arrived without warmth. The city's skyline, still gray from the remnants of dawn, reflected itself in the mirrored windows of City Hall. Inside, light fell through the atrium's glass ceiling like sterile water, clean, cold, without texture. The mayor entered through the side door alone. His security detail had offered to meet him in the underground lot, but he'd declined. The sound of his shoes against the marble echoed through the hall, slow, deliberate, each step a declaration of presence that somehow made him feel less real. The building was immaculate. It always was. The marble floors gleamed with an almost unnatural polish, reflecting ceiling lights like scattered coins. Every surface smelled faintly of disinfectant and order. Clerks moved through corridors in careful patterns. Coffee cups, clipboards, murmured updates. Bureaucracy as choreography. "Good morning, Mayor Lang," someone said as he passed. He nodded, not breaking stride. The voice came from a young aide holding a tablet too tightly, eyes darting with a mixture of reverence and fear. That was new, he thought. Fear. It had not been there before. His office waited at the end of the east wing. Heavy door, frosted glass, the city seal etched into its surface like an emblem of permanence. He paused before entering, hand resting briefly on the metal handle. The same emblem had been on his ID the night before. It had carried no power then. Inside, his assistant, Carla, was already standing by his desk. "Morning, sir," she said softly. Her posture was straighter than usual. "Morning. You've got back-to-back meetings starting at 9, the Council Finance Review, the Parks Commission follow-up, and a press inquiry about the new housing initiative." She hesitated. "Also," he looked up. "Yes?" "There's been a request from the Chief of Police. He'd like to speak privately this afternoon." Her tone was careful, not curious, not questioning, just careful. The word chief lingered in the air like static. He nodded once. "Put it on the calendar." Carla hesitated again, the faintest tremor of concern crossing her face. "Of course." He moved past her and sat at the desk. The chair creaked softly, an ordinary sound that somehow felt intrusive. For a moment he let the silence settle, Outside, the low hum of city administration carried on. Printers, conversations, doors closing with bureaucratic rhythm. But beneath it, he heard something else. A shift. The kind of silence that follows after recognition, when people know, but do not speak. He reached for a folder on the desk, budget reports, a project proposal, something to tether the morning to routine. Numbers were clean, impersonal, obedient. But the paper trembled slightly in his hands, not from weakness, but from the dissonance between the man and the system he led. Through the office glass, reflections multiplied, aides moving like shadows, his own figure ghosted over theirs. The mirrored surfaces distorted everything, the walls, the light, even faces. He found himself staring at his reflection, the faint sheen of fatigue beneath his eyes, the disciplined composure that came from years of practice. It looked convincing enough. "Carla," he said after a long pause, "close the door, please." She obeyed quietly, and the latch clicked shut. The sound was small, but it cut through the room like a line drawn. He leaned back, eyes tracing the ceiling's grid of recessed lights. The pattern reminded him of the cruiser's rotating flashes, order in motion, law performing itself. His mind replayed the night before, not as memory, but as data. Headlights, the measured tone of the officer's voice, the precise angle of the flashlight beam, the glint of the badge. The way silence had hung heavier than sound. It was all procedural, all explainable, all systemic, and entirely personal. The marble floor beneath his desk gleamed like water. It reflected the underside of his chair, his shoes, the edge of the desk, all in perfect symmetry. But reflections lied. They presented a world inverted, flawless, distant from the weight of experience. A knock interrupted. It was Deputy Mayor Ruiz, always punctual, always smiling in public, never smiling in private. "You wanted to review the budget before the committee meets?" Lang gestured to the chair opposite. "Yes, sit." Ruiz did, flipping open his folder. "Everything looks solid for Q4. We just need to finalize the allocations for public safety." Lang's eyes lifted. "Public safety." "Yes, sir." Ruiz hesitated, misreading the pause. "I know it's politically sensitive, but the data's clear. Citizens still list safety as their top concern." "I'm aware." Ruiz adjusted his tie, his confidence thinning. "There's also chatter online about last night." Lang didn't move. Ruiz continued, voice softer now. "I don't know what happened exactly, but people are talking. If it's true, we'll need to get ahead of it. A statement, maybe." The mayor's gaze was steady. "A statement for whom?" "For the public, sir. To show leadership. To prevent misunderstandings." He let the question hang before replying. "There's no misunderstanding, Alan." Ruiz shifted, papers rustling nervously. "Right. Of course. I just meant..." Lang cut in quietly. "We don't manage injustice with language. We expose it." The words landed with quiet force, heavier than volume could make them. Ruiz looked down at his folder, throat tight. "Understood." Silence again, the kind that drains color from a room. When Ruiz finally left, the mayor stood, walking toward the tall window overlooking the city plaza. From up here, the people below looked like small figures moving between the grid lines of a machine. Predictable, replaceable. The fountain sparkled faintly in the sunlight, but even the water seemed rehearsed. He watched for a long time, his reflection layered over the cityscape. It struck him how similar they looked, both built on symmetry, both defined by control. Yet one night's encounter had cracked that illusion. The marble and glass were still there, but they felt thinner now, fragile. Behind him, Carla's voice came through the intercom. "Mayor Lang, your next meeting's ready." He pressed the button. "I'll be there in a moment." When he turned, the floor caught the full reflection of his frame. Precise, composed, immaculate. But the reflection didn't feel like him anymore. It felt like the role the city demanded, a man who must absorb indignity without flinching, who must lead without revealing the wound. He straightened his jacket, adjusted the cufflinks, small gestures of restoration, armor made of decorum. Then he opened the door and stepped back into the hum of the machinery. Every footstep echoed down the marble corridor, crisp, symmetrical, lonely. The sound followed him like memory, like consequence. The briefing room was too bright. Rows of cameras lined the back wall, their lenses black and unblinking, like a silent tribunal. The podium stood under a perfect white spotlight, its wood polished to the point of reflection. Across the front row, reporters shuffled in their seats, checking recorders, adjusting microphones, whispering into phones. The sound was a low electric hum, anticipation disguised as professionalism. Mayor Christopher Lang stood behind the curtain with his aides and communications director. His suit was immaculate. His tie, a deep, steady blue, was knotted too tightly, as if restraint itself had become part of his uniform. "Keep it brief," said Miles, his communications chief. "We're acknowledging the event, not escalating it. Don't make it about race, don't make it about police reform. Just emphasize cooperation, mutual respect." Lang's gaze didn't shift. "Mutual respect?" Miles hesitated. "It'll keep the temperature down." He turned away, adjusting his cufflinks. The temperature was never the problem. The aide fell silent. Around them, the air smelled faintly of stage lighting and coffee, the atmosphere of every controlled performance in public life. But beneath it, something raw and uncontainable pulsed quietly. "Ready, Mr. Mayor?" another aide asked. Lang gave a single nod. When he stepped into the light, the hum stopped. The cameras clicked in bursts, staccato and relentless. Reporters leaned forward. Somewhere in the back, the city seal hung on the wall, gold against navy velvet, authority framed as virtue. He placed both hands on the podium. The microphone stood inches from his mouth, a small metallic presence, weapon or witness, depending on who held it. He began without preamble. "Good morning. I want to address the incident that occurred outside City Hall last night." A ripple of movement. Pens lifted. Fingers poised above keys. "I was stopped by 2 police officers while returning from a community event. I was not speeding. I was not violating any law. The stop was without cause." His voice was steady, each word delivered with surgical precision. "No anger, no plea, only fact. I identified myself." The matter ended quickly. "But what occurred should not depend on who I am." He paused. The silence that followed was not passive. It was active, weight-bearing. The kind of silence that waits to see whether truth will be diluted. "I know what I represent in this city," he continued. "I know that some will say I was treated respectfully once recognized, that the officers meant no harm. I know these phrases. I have heard them before. They are the language of systems preserving themselves." A murmur moved through the room. The mayor did not look at anyone. His eyes stayed fixed somewhere above the crowd, on the invisible machinery behind the visible one. "This is not about 2 officers," he said. "It is about the ease with which authority can forget its own limits and the cost of that forgetfulness." The words fell like measured blows. Each one landed where it was meant to. At the side of the room, Miles shifted uncomfortably, hands clasped tight, his expression halfway between admiration and alarm. Lang continued. "Our city prides itself on fairness, on progress, on being better than others. But fairness is not a feeling. It is not a slogan. It is a discipline. And disciplines must be practiced, not presumed." Another pause. Longer now. The cameras whirred softly, red lights blinking. The sound was faint but constant, a mechanical heartbeat. "I will meet with the police chief later today," he said. "Not as an act of damage control, but as a civic duty. Accountability is not vengeance. It is order." He leaned forward slightly, voice low but sharp. "If we cannot face what is broken, we will keep mistaking the shine of the marble for the strength of the structure," a reporter called out, voice cautious. "Mr. Mayor, do you believe this was racial profiling?" He turned his gaze toward her. The question was expected, but still it hung in the air like a test. "I believe," he said slowly, "that perception is trained by power, and power, when unchecked, learns to see threat where there is none." He straightened his tie, the motion small, habitual, controlled. "Whether you call that bias or blindness, the result is the same." The reporter nodded, lips pressed thin. The next question came immediately from another corner of the room. "Sir, are you concerned this will strain your relationship with law enforcement?" He gave a faint, humorless smile. The relationship was never meant to be comfortable. It was meant to be accountable. A flicker of silence followed, sharper this time, almost physical. The mayor looked down briefly at the notes he had written in longhand that morning. He didn't need them. The words were already carved into him. He looked back up. "There are citizens in this city who could not have ended that encounter as I did. Their safety should not depend on title or recognition. Dignity must not be selective." Someone in the front row exhaled audibly. Lang's eyes moved across the faces, journalists, aides, council members, all watching, some with admiration, some with calculation. He could see himself reflected faintly in the glass of the teleprompter, a double image, the man and the office, inseparable and yet at odds. He concluded quietly, "We speak often of justice as if it were a destination. It is not. It is a posture, one we must hold, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it exposes us. Especially then." He stepped back from the podium. The lights felt hotter now. For a moment, no one moved. The silence was absolute, not the emptiness of confusion, but the kind of stillness that follows moral recognition. Then came the sound of cameras again. Rapid, hungry, devouring the moment, Miles appeared beside him, whispering through his teeth. That wasn't the statement we approved. Lang kept his eyes forward. It was the one that needed to be made. He walked off the stage, the tie knot still tight, the air still electric. Behind him, questions rose in overlapping waves. "Mr. Mayor, a follow-up! Are you calling for reform? Do you fear backlash from the police union?" He didn't turn back. The curtain closed and the sound dimmed. In the narrow hallway behind the stage, fluorescent lights buzzed above. He reached up, loosened the tie, just slightly. Enough to breathe. Not enough to unravel. His reflection in the steel elevator door stared back, composed, deliberate. A man who had learned to turn restraint into a form of power. He pressed the button for the top floor. As the door slid shut, the faint hum of the microphone still echoed in his mind. Not as noise, but as proof. For one moment, the city had heard him. Whether it would listen was another question. And somewhere, unseen, the cameras continued recording, because truth, once spoken into the system, became part of its surveillance. The meeting room was kept at a precise 68 degrees, enough to keep the air crisp, enough to discourage comfort. The blinds were drawn halfway, muting the daylight into a sterile gray. The table in the center gleamed like a mirror, thick glass resting on a steel frame, flawless enough to reflect every face, every gesture, every twitch of avoidance. The mayor sat at the head, hands folded neatly before him. Across the table, 3 men from the police union waited, jackets immaculate, expressions arranged into professional neutrality. Their badges gleamed faintly beneath the overhead lights, gold softened to brass by the glass between them. Coffee had been poured before he arrived. The smell of it lingered, sharp, burnt, institutional. Each man had a cup placed directly before him, equidistant from the table's edge, steam curling upward in disciplined spirals. "Ritualized civility, Mr. Mayor," said the man in the center. "Union President Grant Evers." His voice carried the polished gravel of practiced diplomacy. "We appreciate you making time for us on short notice." Lang inclined his head. "Of course. I want to start by saying how sorry we are that you had to experience any inconvenience last night." The phrasing landed flat. Inconvenience. A euphemism that reeked of training manuals. "And legal review," Evers continued, gesturing slightly with one hand. "Our officers didn't intend any disrespect. They were following standard procedures. We all know tensions are high these days, and Lang interrupted softly. You call that procedure? Evers blinked, smile tightening. Sir? You call stopping a citizen without cause, without explanation, procedure? The union president straightened slightly. With respect, Mayor Lang, our officers operate under complex conditions. They're trained to act on instinct to ensure public safety. Whose safety? The question was quiet, but it settled in the room like weight. Evers didn't answer. His colleague, a younger representative with a pen tapping nervously against his notepad, filled the silence. We understand how this looks, sir. But let's be clear, no laws were broken. There was no use of force, no misconduct. It was an unfortunate misunderstanding. Lang's eyes flicked toward the glass tabletop. Their reflections hovered upside down, distorted, the room's fluorescent light slicing through their faces. That word again, he said. Misunderstanding. Evers cleared his throat. We just don't want this to become political. The mayor looked up directly at him. It already is. The room stilled. The clock on the wall ticked audibly, slow, methodical, almost performative. Time itself seemed to be watching. Evers leaned back slightly. Mr. Mayor, you have to understand these situations are delicate. Public perception can do more damage than the facts themselves. If you escalate this, it could affect morale, recruitment, community trust. Lang's tone remained even. Community trust. He said the words as if testing their structure. Tell me, President Evers, how do you define that? The man hesitated. Trust is confidence, that the police are working for the good of the people. And what happens, Lang asked, when the people realize that confidence has been misplaced? No one spoke. The younger representative stopped tapping his pen. Steam rose from the untouched coffee, curling between them like breath from an unseen mouth. Lang leaned back slightly. I'm not here to argue policy. I know the language, protocols, optics, morale. But what I experienced last night wasn't policy. It was instinct. And instincts tell us what systems have taught. Evers shifted, clasping his hands. We can issue a formal apology if that would help ease tensions. Lang's reply was measured. It wouldn't. He let that settle before continuing. Apologies, like procedures, protect the institution first. I'm not interested in being the exception that proves your civility. I want to know what happens when the next man isn't the mayor. Evers' composure cracked for a moment, a brief flicker of defensiveness beneath the surface. With all due respect, sir, our officers don't see color. Then they don't see at all. The sentence cut cleanly through the air. It was not raised in anger. It was delivered like diagnosis. A long silence followed. Only the clock persisted, a metronome for discomfort. Lang stood then, slow and deliberate. The motion drew every eye upward. His reflection rose with him in the table's glass, an inverted image, standing on air. He placed both hands on the surface, palms open. Gentlemen, this isn't about me. It's about what you represent when you wear that badge. You think authority is protection. It isn't, it's exposure. He straightened. And the city is watching now. Evers exhaled softly, the sound more defensive than weary. We'll review the incident, Mr. Mayor, that's all we can promise. Lang nodded once. Promises are easy. Change is not. He turned slightly toward the window. The blinds still filtered the light into gray bands that striped across the room, cutting through the table, the faces, the coffee. Everything divided. When he faced them again, his tone was final. You'll issue no apology. You'll issue a review. Transparent, verifiable, public. If you won't do it for justice, do it for the record. Evers's mouth opened, then closed. He looked down at his coffee. The steam now gone, surface cooled to stillness. Lang checked his watch. Gentlemen, we're done here. He walked out without another word. The door closed softly behind him, but its sound echoed, hollow, definitive. Inside, the men remained seated, each looking anywhere but at one another. The glass table reflected their downturned faces, merging them into a single distorted shape, authority without clarity. Outside, the hallway felt almost too bright. The mayor adjusted his cuffs as he walked, eyes fixed ahead. His steps were slow, precise, matching the rhythm of the clock still ticking behind the door. Each tick was a reminder. Systems do not change by apology. They change by confrontation, by endurance, by exposure. He reached the end of the corridor and paused before the elevator. The polished chrome doors reflected him faintly, an image fractured by light. Somewhere inside that reflection, two men were still sitting at a glass table drinking cold coffee, rehearsing the language of order, and the clock kept ticking, impartial, patient, marking the distance between acknowledgement and accountability. It was close to midnight when the mayor's car pulled into the police precinct's side lot. The streets were nearly empty, the city's noise reduced to a mechanical hum beneath the sodium lamps. He had told no one where he was going, not his staff, not his security detail. This was not a gesture of politics. It was something quieter, heavier. The station's facade was a block of concrete softened only by its own fatigue. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed steadily, casting every shadow too sharply to be trusted. He entered through the side door, nodding once to the night desk sergeant. The man stiffened, half rising from his chair. "Mr. Mayor, sir, no one said you were coming." "I didn't," Lang replied. His voice was calm, not secretive, simply matter of fact. "I'm here to see Officers Dalton and Reeves." The sergeant blinked. "They're still on shift, sir. I'll wait." The sergeant hesitated, then gestured toward a small interview room down the hall. "You can sit in there, sir." "I'll send them in." Lang nodded, removed his coat, and stepped inside. The room was rectangular, undecorated, lit by a single fluorescent panel overhead. Its light was the color of exposure, too white, too honest. The table in the center was steel, unyielding, its surface marred with faint scratches. 3 chairs surrounded it, though Lang remained standing. He placed his coat across the back of the nearest chair but did not sit. His hands rested on the table, folded lightly, fingers interlaced. Control made visible. Through the thin wall, he could hear distant footsteps, the echo of a phone ringing, the murmur of radios, the background pulse of law enforcement, steady and impersonal. When the door finally opened, the 2 officers entered in uniform. Dalton, the younger, kept his eyes low. Reeves, older, broader, carried himself with the stiffness of someone unwilling to concede even an inch. "Mr. Mayor," Reeves said first. His tone clipped, respectful but cold. Lang regarded them both for a long moment before speaking. "Sit down," they obeyed. The chair legs screeched against the tile, the sound too loud in the small room. He remained standing. "I asked for this meeting," Lang began, "because I prefer clarity to paperwork." No one answered. The fluorescent light hummed faintly above them, filling the silence with its constant vibration. "You stopped me 2 nights ago," he continued. "Outside City Hall, no infraction, no warrant, no reason. You asked for my ID, and when I gave it to you, everything changed. You know that?" Reeves shifted slightly in his seat, his jaw tight. Dalton's eyes flicked toward the table, as if searching for something to hold. "I want to hear it," Lang said. "From you. Why the stop?" Reeves cleared his throat. "Routine patrol, sir. We observed a vehicle idling near the building. We thought it looked suspicious." "Suspicious," Lang repeated. "What does that look like?" Reeves hesitated. "It's not about appearance, sir. It's about context." "It was late," Lang interrupted quietly. "You mean the context of me? My skin, my car, my presence where you didn't expect it." Neither man responded. The silence stretched. The room seemed smaller for it. Dalton spoke finally, voice subdued. "Sir, I didn't know who you were. I was just following my partner's lead." "That's the problem," Lang said. "You didn't need to know who I was to treat me with respect. You just needed to remember I was a citizen." Dalton's throat bobbed. "Yes, sir." Reeves leaned forward slightly. "With respect, Mr. Mayor, we did nothing unlawful. We didn't draw weapons." You didn't need to," Lang said. The words were quiet, but they landed with the precision of a gavel. Reeves's mouth opened, then closed again. He looked away toward the wall, the neutral gray where accountability went to hide. Lang stepped closer, resting one hand on the steel table. "Do you know what I remember most from that night?" He asked. Neither answered. "The silence," he said. "Not the flashing lights. Not the questions. The silence. When you realized who I was, It wasn't embarrassment. It was calculation. You were measuring how much of your instinct had been seen. Reeves's jaw flexed, but he said nothing. Dalton swallowed hard. I have no intention of ruining your careers, Lang continued. That would be too easy. And it would change nothing. Dalton looked up. Sir, I'm sorry. I truly am, Lang regarded him. The apology was unpolished, unprepared. It carried the tremor of youth, of realization too late to undo. Reeves remained silent, arms folded now. His defiance was quieter than anger. It was habit. Lang turned to him. And you? Reeves met his gaze. I did my job, sir. Lang nodded once, as if the statement itself had proven something larger. Yes, he said softly. That's exactly what I'm afraid of. He straightened, the fluorescent light catching the edge of his face. You think your badge protects you, but it exposes you. Every act under that light becomes part of the record, written or not. He glanced at the empty chair on his side of the table. It remained untouched. A deliberate distance, a boundary he refused to collapse. When he spoke again, his tone shifted. Lower, steadier. Gentlemen, this city will not survive on denial. I can't legislate conscience, but I can expose its absence. Consider this your warning. Not disciplinary, but moral. Reeves's face hardened, but his eyes flickered just once, a flash of something uncertain. Lang stepped back, collecting his coat from the chair. The motion was slow, deliberate, unhurried. That's all, he said. Dalton rose quickly. Thank you, sir. Reeves followed slower. The older man's nod was mechanical, his expression unreadable. As they left, the fluorescent light buzzed louder for a moment, the sound of voltage, of truth pressing against silence. Lang remained for a while, standing alone in the room. His reflection swam faintly in the steel tabletop, fractured by scratches. The hum of the light felt endless. He sat then, not in the untouched chair, but in one of theirs. The seat was still warm. It carried the faint scent of coffee, sweat, and the residue of fear disguised as discipline. He folded his hands again, the gesture unchanged. Somewhere down the hall, a door closed. The sound echoed like a verdict. He sat in the stillness, letting the weight of restraint settle back over him. This, he knew, was what power truly was. Not the ability to punish, but the endurance to remain composed when everything inside demanded rupture. The fluorescent light above flickered once, then steadied. Truth, he thought, is not illumination. It is exposure. He rose, put on his coat, and left the room. Behind him, the hum continued, a soundless reminder that systems, once lit, rarely go dark again. The city did not stop. It never did. By the end of the week, the footage of the mayor's speech had already blurred into the next crisis, the next headline. The morning news spoke of budget revisions, zoning disputes, an upcoming parade. The language of governance had resumed its practiced rhythm, neutral, efficient, empty, yet beneath it all, something trembled. Quietly, City Hall returned to its rituals. The marble floors gleamed as they always did, but their reflections felt warped, thinner somehow, as if the building itself had absorbed a kind of fatigue. Staffers moved through corridors with the brisk pace of people determined not to remember. Mayor Lang arrived each morning the same way, precise, punctual, unyielding. His aides greeted him with measured warmth, their eyes flickering toward him, then away again. They did not mention the incident. No one did. But the silence around it had weight, dense, immovable, like architecture. He resumed meetings, signed documents, attended hearings. He spoke only when necessary, yet the rhythm of his presence had changed. During one meeting in the council chamber, a debate on infrastructure funding, he noticed the pause before a councilman spoke, a hesitation too slight to name. The man adjusted his microphone, cleared his throat, and chose his words carefully, as if language itself had become a fragile instrument. Lang observed without reacting. His silence had become its own form of governance. In the afternoon, he walked the perimeter of his office alone. The city stretched beyond the glass, an endless geometry of streets and lights, indifferent and alive. Cars moved like thoughts through the arteries of the grid. Somewhere among them, 2 officers finished another shift. He removed his ID badge from his jacket and placed it on the desk. The gold seal of the city glimmered faintly in the afternoon light. It looked almost ceremonial now, a token of belonging that had once failed him and yet somehow defined him. He turned it over in his hand. The plastic edge caught a reflection from the window. Half shadow, half brilliance. Identity, he thought, was less a possession than a negotiation. When he reattached it to his lapel, it was not out of pride, but resolve. A knock sounded at the door. His chief of staff entered, holding a folder. "They want you to consider a statement for the press, sir," she said. "Something brief." "About the department reforms." Lang looked at her, expression steady. "No statement," he said. She hesitated. "Sir, the media, they'll say what they will," he interrupted softly. "Let them." "I've already spoken." The woman nodded once, retreating. When she was gone, Lang stood by the window again. He rested his hand on the cold glass, feeling the faint vibration of the city beneath it, the invisible hum of transit lines, generators, the breath of millions moving in synchronized anonymity. He imagined the streets he knew by heart, the square where the marchers gathered years ago, the underpass where the graffiti spelled "Still Here," the park where mothers hushed their children as sirens passed. The city was a living contradiction, fragile and relentless, wounded and unrepentant. Outside, daylight sank into the slow amber of evening. The skyline ignited, windows, streetlights, neon signs, each bulb a small defiance against the encroaching dark. From above, the city resembled a nervous system, flickering, self-aware. He thought of the officers' faces that night at the precinct, one contrite, one unyielding. He thought of the silence between them, how it mirrored the silence of this entire place. Not empty. Just waiting, Lang moved back to his desk. A stack of papers awaited his signature. Policy, budgets, resolutions. The machinery of a city pretending to be moral through process. He signed them anyway, each stroke deliberate, his name a small disruption in ink. When the last document was done, he sat still for a long time, the pen motionless between his fingers. There was no satisfaction, no victory. But there was clarity, and clarity he knew was rarer than justice. He reached for the light switch, hesitated, then left the room dark. The city's glow was enough. Outside, on the steps of City Hall, the security guard greeted him quietly. Lang nodded in return. He walked down the stone staircase alone, his footsteps echoing faintly. Across the street, people passed without looking up. Some recognized him. Most did not. That anonymity comforted him. It meant the city continued, imperfect, blind, alive. As he reached the sidewalk, a gust of wind caught the edge of his coat. He paused, looking back once at the building. The columns, the glass, the flag above it rippling against the night. For the first time, it seemed smaller. He walked east toward his car. The air smelled faintly of rain and exhaust. Streetlights flickered overhead, each one humming in its socket. 1,000 small witnesses to a truth too large to name. When he reached the corner, he stopped. The light changed from red to green. Cars moved. The city exhaled. Lang looked up at the skyline, towers and grids and restless motion. In their glow, he could almost see the outline of what might come next, a shift not yet visible, but present, forming beneath the surface like a second heartbeat. He adjusted his tie, felt the ID badge against his chest, and crossed the street. Behind him, the city continued its performance, unbroken, unrepentant but seen. The lights blinked on and off, steady and trembling, like a conscience learning to stay awake.